The next day, Hiraku woke up, ready for the day's work. While he stands ready with his tools, he notices a presence behind him. Turning around, he realizes that it's just Zabuton. Then he seeks to know what is going on. Zabuton shows him a large bee it has just captured. Seeing the bee, Hiraku acknowledges how large it is and wonders what his large spider friend wishes to do with it. When he asks if Zabuton wishes to eat it, it replies negatively. However, it intends to keep the bee as a pet. This Hiraku thinks will be dangerous, but Zabuton assures him that the bee will not fight back, as it is customary for every new resident of the farm. Hiraku builds a small house for the bees next. Surprisingly, the bees built a nest of their own inside the house in just the space of 10 days. While he commends the worker bees for being so busy, he only realizes that they are the only ones with a small size compared to their large-looking queen. Looking at the huge nest the bees have made, Hiraku wonders if they would make honey for him to harvest soon. In order to be able to harvest honey as he wishes to, he considers planting a flower garden nearby the bee house. At this time, his thoughts are interrupted by Tia, who wishes to tell him something, but flees immediately after seeing the large bee nest in the house. Seeing her do this, Hiraku imagines that she must have been stung before. Later that day, Hiraku completes the construction of a large hole in the ground. When he's finished, Leah wonders what it is. Just then, he informs her that it's a reservoir. Furthermore, he reveals his earlier plans of drawing water from the river through a waterway, but he hasn't been able to do it since he had been busy with other things. This innovation sounds impressive to Leah, who goes ahead to ask how far he has gone with the waterway construction. To this, he admits to being stuck as he hasn't progressed far enough. This is due to the fact that he still hasn't figured out what he will make it out of yet. To get her help, he breaks down the entire process. Apparently, there is a lot of distance between the farm and the river. However, Leah asks that they decide what to build the waterway out of first. Just then, Hiraku talks about how he had always imagined waterways to be built out of stone, but she thinks it will be really hard to find stone to work with around the farm. With the idea of using stone out of the way, Hiraku suggests they make the waterway out of wood. As much as Leah acknowledges that they have a lot of wood, she doesn't feel comfortable with the fact that the length of the waterway would cause a lot of leakages. As a last resort, Hiraku decides to use dirt he had gathered to form something as hard as concrete. The dirt happened to be the part he had gotten from digging the reservoir, and this seemed like the perfect use for it. With both of them agreeing to the use of this dirt, they embark on mass production of the concrete waterways. With this equipment, they built an intake gate for the water at the top of the waterfall. After that, they built the foundation of the waterway and placed the water path on it. Since they are better than him at building, Hiraku lets the elves handle the basic foundation work, while he focuses on strengthening the foundation. Due to the assistance rendered by the elves, the construction ended up moving a lot faster than Hiraku had expected it to. Upon completion of the waterways, the water moves smoothly down and into the reservoir, and they are all pleased at the fruit of their hard work. Most especially, they are pleased at the fact that they won't have to climb in or out of the well for water while working every day. Also, one of the elves admits to the fact that the new reservoir would make watering the crops much easier. Fortunately, while walking past the waterway, Hiraku sees a fish bounce out of the water. Seeing this, he is pleased as he assumes that the sudden access to the river would give him the chance to eat fish again. His only problem, however, is figuring out the perfect way to prepare them. This is because he feels the fishes are so normal and easy to catch. Just then, he sees a much larger fish bounce out of the water and almost attack him. Fortunately, he cuts it before it gets the chance to do so. Shortly after, Hiraku grills the fish for food. Seeing the fish on the stick, Tia and Lu identify it as a fish from the Forest of Death. And even the most vicious one at that. This makes them wonder if it is even safe to eat the fish. When Hiraku gets done with the preparation, he offers them a piece, but they decline, stating that he should try it first since he made it. Without much thought, Hiraku grabs a bite of the fish, and it tastes great. Since nothing happened to him after eating it, they are all convinced that it's harmless. At that moment, they are offered a plate each, which they grab and reluctantly grab a bite of the fish. After tasting it, they both acknowledge how delicious it tastes. This prompts the other elves to step out of hiding, demanding their portion. After giving the elves theirs, Hiraku preserves the leftover fish in order to make them fresh enough to serve next time they decide to eat them. Later that day, Hiraku harvests some rice which he had planted, and is surprised to see that it has grown in normal soil. However, he decides to build a rice paddy now that they have easy access to water. To do that, he single-handedly digs the paddy and fills it up with water. Seeing the water in the large hole, the elves assume he has just constructed a pond for fish. Hearing them say this makes Hiraku laugh, but he informs them about his next line of action, which would involve them. For this, he hands them some rice seedlings which they have to get into the water in order to plant. Since they are new to this, he shows them how it's done. And since the elves are fast learners, they grasp it immediately and get it right away. After a while, the rice grows so fast that Hiraku is left wondering what the true cause is. Seeing how well they have grown, Hiraku informs them that it is time to harvest the crops. To make this faster, he employs the help of the elves once again, and they do it swiftly. Staring at the rice hanging out in the open, Leah wonders what they are to do next, and Hiraku informs her that they are waiting for the rice to dry. When the rice dries, the others ask Hiraku what they are to do next, and he suggests that they should thresh it. This helps them separate the rice from its leaves. Then they put the rice through a sieve to get rid of any remaining leaves or plants. After that, they make use of a mortar to remove the husk from the rice, and use a pestle to polish it. These processes seem exhausting to others who think the process takes a lot of work. They wonder if the rice cannot be eaten if all of this is not done. In a brief moment, Hiraku finally gets done with processing the rice, and is excited about the outcome. When Lu and Tia see him like this, they assume it's time to eat the rice. Unfortunately, they are told that it isn't time yet, since the rice has to be cooked. Before doing so, Hiraku directs Lu to set the fire, and she doesn't really understand him. Instead of doing so, she tries to show the full extent of her power, but he calls her to order, demanding just a low flame. After a while, the rice is ready and Hiraku makes it into balls. When he offers Lu and Tia a piece, Tia asks Lu to go first, since she assumes it will not taste as good as he claims. When Lu takes a bite, she nods in satisfaction, allowing Tia to do the same, and the two are thrilled with how delicious it tastes. Looking closely, they discover the fish they had eaten the other day in the rice. Apparently, Hiraku had put it in there since the saltiness of the fish goes well with the rice. With how well the rice tastes, Leah acknowledges the stress of all the hard work that they had done to make the rice. Seeing them enjoy this, Hiraku states that this is the happiest moment as a farmer. Just then, he turns aside to grab a rice ball, but discovers that the tray is empty. Looking around, he realizes that the elves have taken everything due to how tasty it is. Seeing them, he's happy that they all enjoy it. This makes him determined to work harder in order to make more. Without wasting much time, Hiraku gets to planting more rice. After a long and tiring day planting rice seedlings, Hiraku instructs the elves to stop work for the day. One after another, the elves make use of their magical powers to cleanse themselves. This, however, is not a luxury Hiraku can afford. This makes him wish he had a bath he could easily hop in. However, since he has successfully built a waterway, Hiraku decides to build a bath. To do this, he first draws a plan on the ground for Lu, Tia, and Leah to see. Seeing this, the three have no idea what a bath is. After explaining it to them, Hiraku breaks down what he intends to build in each location of the bath. Firstly, he intends to build a furnace to heat the water, then a tub to hold water, and finally a place to wash the body. Also, he considers making a changing room. Seeing this, the three wonder if they can't just wash themselves in the river. But he states that it will not be safe to do so during the winter. Furthermore, he assures them that the baths are great, trying to convince them about how useful it can be. Seeing how desperate he is for a bath, they agree to help him with the construction. Step by step, the elves help Hiraku in constructing the bath by setting up the areas he had outlined. With everything set, Hiraku is faced with the dilemma of where to put wastewater from the bath, since it would contaminate the river. Hearing him sound worried about this, Tia considers them using slimes, since they are known to eat waste products and serve as nature's cleansing machines. Just then, Tia flies away to get some slimes, and shortly after, she returns with a bowl of them. Without wasting much time, Hiraku places some slimes in the purification area and accepts Tia's suggestion to place some in the toilet. While gathering some wood for the furnace, Hiraku sees some mushrooms growing on them. This makes him remember the different opinions of the girls about the mushrooms in the area. He, however, goes ahead with developing a means to make the mushrooms grow more than they have. Meanwhile, they are finally done with the construction of the bath, and Hiraku tasks himself with the responsibility of teaching the rest how to take their bath. He briefs them on the process step by step. However, Tia feels it would be better to show them by doing it herself. Just then, he goes ahead to have a bath and finds himself in the tub. Not long after, the others take off their clothes and join him, not regarding his gender. The next day, Hiraku returns to check on the mushrooms and is thrilled to see how much they have grown. On the other hand, the dogs find 5 new elves and lead them to the settlement. When they introduce themselves, Hiraku realizes how similar they are to Leah's group. Since they would be helpful, Hiraku wastes no time in accepting them. As a sign of appreciation, they decide to reconstruct Hiraku's house. Meanwhile, Hiraku's dog, Kuro, talks about how he met Hiraku. Apparently, he had been attacked by a grappler bear, the king of the forest, and forced to leave after the bear spared him. Also, because they were too injured to stay, this incident led him to find Hiraku, who ended up taking care of him and his female counterpart. Then Hiraku gave them names, after which they went on to bear many children. He's impressed, since his master now has a pack of his own. He is concerned that Hiraku is unaware that they are the Inferno Wolves. However, he thinks everything will be fine. The elves complete the renovation of Hiraku's house, just as they said they would, and this gets him excited. However, he had done a lot of extra work during the building of the house, and had a feeling the house would turn out like that. However, he never expected it to be as good as what he saw. While staring at the house, Lou informs him that she and Tia had helped with the design. Furthermore, Tia informs him that they had made sure the requests of the future residents were granted while building the house. This makes Hiraku wonder what this request is, since he is also a resident of the house. At that moment, Leah suggests that they embark on a tour of the house. Going in, Hiraku is thrilled with how large and similar it is to the elves' main hall. In reply, Leah informs him that it had been built that way to give everyone enough space to hang out. Moving further, Hiraku is led to his room, which he likes at first sight. After that, he is led to a spacious dining table situated across his room, with other spaces in the house, including a kitchen, a store with stoves, a cellar, and underground storage space for food and firewood, and private rooms for Lou and Tia. Seeing their rooms, the two are very pleased, especially since their previous place is now crowded by the elves. On the other hand, while the two admire their rooms, Hiraku sees a room locked with a bolt lock and wonders what they could possibly have put in there since it had a lock. When he opens it, he sees a large bed meant for couples. Immediately, he closes the door and vows to pretend not to have seen it. After the tour, Lou and Tia seemed very excited about the new house. About to leave, Hiraku sees a large tree beside the house, and he states that it seems like the tree is watching over them. This makes him believe that the house is a really great house. This Leah finds as a compliment. Before she leaves, she tells him to inform her about any part of the house he finds inconvenient during their stay, especially since winter is coming. If there is a need, she promises to fix it immediately. Shortly after, Hiraku places statues of his dogs at the entrance of the house. To him, this makes the house more in good shape than it already was. After the amount of stress they had experienced that day, Lou and Tia were hungry and went to ask Hiraku about what they had been eating that day. In response, Hiraku states that he wishes to make a dish they haven't tried before. He says it is something new called curry. Hearing the name of the dish, Tia acknowledged that she had never heard of it before. However, the fact that he claims he's trying to make it makes them wonder just how difficult the dish is to make. Even though Hiraku admits that mastering the dish takes a lot of work, he states that it can be easy to make. To get the ingredients for making the curry, Hiraku shows them a crop field he had planted a while ago. Seeing it, Lou and Tia are impressed with him. Just then, he stated that he had been working at it little by little. Looking closely, the ladies do not seem to recognize any of the plants. Apparently, he had planted them using the almighty farming tools the elves had made. The tools allow him the chance to grow plants that are really sensitive to seasonal weather. That being said, Hiraku gets to harvesting the needed spices for the curry. To begin, he cuts some cumin. The cumin, however, seems like an already dried flower, but Hiraku makes them understand that all that is needed is the seed that gets left behind after it gets dried up. He states that this spice is most peculiar because of curry's smell. Next, he harvests some turmeric, the main ingredient which gives curry its color. This plant has a very large upper part, but Hiraku states that they only care about the roots. However, they would have to dry it up first. To do so, he employs the services of Tia and Lu, who use their magic to hasten the process. After this, he harvests some coriander seeds, which would have to be ground before use. Next, they harvest some cilantro leaves, which seem to have a potent aroma. When he offers the leaves to the dogs to eat, they run away after smelling them. Seeing this, Tia and Lu are thrilled upon the realization that there is a plant capable of driving off infernal wolves. This discovery, they say, is worthy of research. To cap it all, they harvest some black pepper and cayenne peppers. After getting all the spices he needs, Hiraku turns around to discover that the girls have left him all alone. This makes him remember that he had heard about girls finding men who make their own curry, starting with the spices to be pains in the ass. He, however, wonders if that's true. With all the spices placed on the table, Hiraku is ready to make some curry. However, he is surprised to find just Leah there to help him. However, she informs him that they are busy with research on a supposed all-powerful magical protection talisman. This would definitely be associated with what they had seen earlier, which involved how the plant scared the infernal wolves away. While Hiraku has no idea what they are doing, he goes ahead with the cooking. Step by step, he and Leah prepare the meal, and he uses the opportunity to explain the entire process to her. While they cook, some elves and dogs are drawn by the smell of the spices and hang around, watching from a distance. With the curry now on fire, Hiraku has a feeling that something is missing. Thinking carefully, he remembers that he had put some naan on the fire earlier. However, they have now gotten burned. While he contemplates on either cooking something else or cooking some rice, he comes to the realization that naan goes better with curry. Just then, he decides to make some more naan. Together with Leah, they prepare the dough for naan. Meanwhile, Lu and Tia finally finish up their supposed research and are heading back when they perceive the smell of something appetizing. They, however, see some elves and dogs looking through the bushes at the origin of the appealing smell. This reminded Tia of how hungry she was. On the other hand, Hiraku and Leah are done with preparing the naan, and only wait a moment for the curry to be made. When the curry is ready, everyone is seated at the dining table, but are reluctant about trying this new meal, since it seems to have a strange color. As much as Hiraku tries to convince them with his words to try it out, they remain reluctant. Not until he tastes it himself and blurts out how nice it tastes. Just then, Lu and Tia follow and state how addicting the spices could turn out to be. This prompts the others to taste it, and they marvel at how unique it tastes. Without wasting much time, they all head to the pot to scoop some curry for themselves. When Hiraku sees them do this, he doesn't want the incident with the rice balls to repeat itself, and begs them to leave some for him. As part of their research, Lu and Tia offer the wolves some curry, but they run away after smelling it. This validates the belief that the plant works to repel wolves. After everyone has eaten, Hiraku is pleased that they all love it. On the other hand, they all ate their fill and hope to try it again sometime. Meanwhile, with winter drawing near, Hiraku makes plans for their survival. Since they would be spending most of their time in the house, he intends to finish up winter preparations before winter comes. Firstly, he makes sure they wouldn't lack firewood by storing a large quantity in the underground storage of the house. After that, he offers Zabuton some potatoes in exchange for extra blankets to keep them warm. Meanwhile, Leah and the elves get busy with other projects that will help them in the winter. On the other hand, Lee and Tia have been tasked with the preservation of food for the winter. They season the meat and smoke it, after which they dry it. Also, since the dogs won't be able to hunt in the winter, Hiraku makes sure they do so now to enable them to stock up as much meat as possible. On his part, Hiraku works on creating a means for them to preserve vegetables. Fortunately, he comes up with a box which can be used for the purpose. Apparently, the vegetable would be placed in it and covered in a sheet, which would then receive snow, giving off the required cold temperature the vegetables would need to survive. Meanwhile, watching the others use magic makes Hiraku wish once more that he could. This time, he tries it out and is disappointed at the obvious outcome. Even though he didn't expect anything different to happen, he felt that trying would probably give him a different outcome. Well, it didn't work. Later that night, he seeks Leah's guidance in learning magic. He claims to have always tried to replicate their actions, but didn't find it as easy as they made it seem. She, however, lets him know that they had always tried to replicate Tia's, whose magic is so powerful that she is able to summon golems. This, she claims, is something that not everyone with magic can do. While Hiraku finds her to be extraordinary, Leah feels bad that he doesn't consider her the same way. Noticing this, he commends Leah and the elves for their efforts around the settlement so far. Furthermore, he states that they have been more useful than him, who only spends his time planting flowers and doing menial jobs. In reply, she informs him that he is the most amazing one amongst them, because he has been surviving in this place alone for a long time. Hearing these words from Leah gives Hiraku the needed validation he seeks. Days after, winter arrives, and the snow began to fall. Since they are unable to leave the house, Hiraku crafts out some indoor games to keep themselves busy. First, he built a chest and mahjong set. Since they have no idea about how the game is played, Hiraku explains the details of the mahjong game to Lu and Tia. Hearing the rules, Lu thinks it's so simple and will be no fun. However, Tia thinks otherwise, and the two are forced to challenge themselves. While they play, it is obvious that Tia will win the game, and since Lu doesn't intend to lose squarely, she flips the board claiming her hand flipped. Shockingly, Tia resets the game with her magic, giving Lu no excuse but to face her loss squarely. In another room, Kuro teaches an elf how to play the mahjong game, and this surprises Hiraku. Also, two dogs spend their time playing the game of chess. Even though they seem cute, Hiraku is worried since he can sense a terrifying energy from them. He, however, resolves to not ever challenge them in a game. Just then, Lu challenges one of the dogs to a game and is utterly defeated. When they play a game of 4, Hiraku assumes he can get his revenge on Kuro by winning, but ends up being the sore loser. Furthermore, since playing board games might not be good for their health, Hiraku builds a mini bowling set. However, on his first shot, it seems like he's pretty good, as he brings down 8 figures with 2 left. Then on the second trial, he successfully brings the 2 down. After that, Lu tries it out and successfully brings 10 of the figures down in one try. Fortunately, it seems to be her first win so far, but not the same for Hiraku, who seems to have better luck creating the games than actually playing them. With days passing, they are all able to endure the winter and are met by the warm atmosphere that accompanies spring. When they wake up, Hiraku suggests that they plant some crops and get Zabuton to wake up from her hibernation. Shortly after, they hear a signal from afar, signifying the arrival of an unknown being. Running in that direction, Hiraku sees a large-looking monster approaching them, and assumes it's a dragon. On seeing it, Tia discovers that it is actually a wyvern. Hearing her say this, Lu cannot seem to believe it. Following Zabuton's warning taps, Hiraku, Ru, and Tia immediately run in the direction of the intruder. Up in the sky flying towards them, they can see a large red wyvern. The wyvern flaps its wings and gives a loud roar over the forest. Hiraku had never expected a monster like that to show up, and he hopes that maybe it will just ignore them and pass through. Unfortunately, the wyvern instantly compresses mana in its mouth and prepares itself to breathe fire. Lu and Tia quickly act and put a strong barrier over the farm. The wyvern's breath attack coming at them was blocked, but small fires rain down and start burning the farm. The elves rapidly jump into action to put out the fire. Lu and Tia are considering if they should attack the wyvern, but Lu isn't sure if they can even pierce the wyvern's barriers. Hiraku is worriedly looking around thinking about what they should do. With the elves putting out fires and the wyvern flying over them, he wonders if they should try to escape into the forest, but the wyvern can just follow them from the sky. He realizes that his only choice is to drive the wyvern away, but how? While thinking that he has to protect everyone, the magic omnipotent farming tool suddenly materializes in his hand in the shape of a spear. He starts wondering how that ever happened, but he has no time to think about it. He just decides to take the power and fully use it. With that, he powerfully throws the spear at the flying wyvern. The spear flew straight and true toward the wyvern, but the wyvern creates a 3-layered barrier to protect itself. The spear and the barrier clash in a brilliant show of power, but the spear manages to break through the 3 barriers and hit the wyvern at its wing, burning it away. Back in the ground, Rue and Tia cannot believe what happened. The tool turns to Hiraku's hand and he repeats the process. He again changes it into a spear and throws it at the wyvern. The spear goes straight through its chest and the wyvern falls down to the forest below. While walking to the wyvern's crash site, Ria reports to Hiraku that they managed to put out the fires. There was some damage to the crop fields, but all of the buildings were fine. Meanwhile, they finally reach the dead wyvern's corpse. He asks the others if there are more of those creatures, and Lou explains that there are, but running into one as large as the one that attacked them is a very rare occurrence. Hiraku wonders if someone might have sent the wyvern to specifically attack them. But Tia points out that if someone does manage to command a wyvern, they wouldn't send such a rare and valuable creature off on its own, so the wyvern most probably is just a wild one. As his last question, Hiraku asks the girls if they can eat the wyvern. That afternoon, Hiraku cooks the wyvern meat into different delicacies. He was able to create a wyvern round steak grilled with spices. As for the breast meat, he wrapped it in leaves and steamed it. The tail meat, meanwhile, was simmered into a stew with various vegetables. Everyone starts eating and they all find the food very delicious. While eating, Lou curiously asks Tia if she can block an attack from the spear, like the one Hiraku used earlier, and Tia answered that she absolutely couldn't. The attack was powerful enough to pierce through a triple-layered barrier and blow a hole through a wyvern's chest. The 2 girls realized that they were very lucky that Kuro and the dogs were the only ones that they ran into first when they came here, not Hiraku and his spear. Hiraku notices the 2 girls talking and asks them if they found a bone or something, and the girls immediately change the topic. At that same moment, in the demonic kingdom of Galgarado, inside the Demon Lord's castle, 3 individuals are having a meeting. They are 3 of the Demon Lord's 4 great generals, Bizel, Randan, and Gratz. They cannot believe the report they have just received of a wyvern being killed. A wyvern drawing near would have immediately required them to mobilize their entire military force, but someone managed to kill it with just 2 hits. They instantly realize they cannot fight someone like that. Bizel reminds them as generals they have to handle the situation before fear and panic spreads among their citizens. Randan immediately suggests an idea. They should resign. Elsewhere in the Gatekeeper Dragons, the dragon Drime is talking with a human, Gucci. They have just witnessed the fight between the human and the dragon, and Drime asks Gucci what would happen if he received such an attack from the spear. Gucci honestly tells him that it would have cleanly speared through him. He then tells the dragon that it would be foolish for them to attack, and Drime agrees. The next day, Hiraku is quietly staring at his vineyard. The wyvern meat was every bit as delicious as it was said to be, but he felt like there was still one thing missing from the meal. The girls then arrive and Hiraku tells them that it's time for them to create alcohol. If they are going to make alcohol out of grapes, then it's going to be wine. Wine already existed in this world, so everyone was excited about making it. The elves quickly harvested all the grapes in the vineyard and gathered them in large baskets. Now all that's left is to squish them and let them ferment. To do that, Hiraku makes a contraption where they put all the grapes and the girls can crush it with their feet. The girls are hesitant to stomp on something that they're going to drink, but Hiraku encourages them from below the machine, where he is waiting to gather the juices. He had prepared barrels with the high elf Lalasha's help, making the containers watertight. Tia and Ria hesitantly step on the grapes and start crushing them. Hiraku instructs them to move in a circular motion around the thing, but Tia slips and falls down on Ria, covering them both in juices. After getting up, Tia suggests that they could probably stomp easier if they have a way to be in rhythm. That way, all their movements will be in sync. One of the elves proposes a song that they used to sing in their village while working together. They all sing the song together, and the 2 girls stomping the grapes follow the beat of the songs. Thanks to their new rhythm, they are able to stomp in sync around the thing and juice continuously flows out to the barrels. Tia invites Lu to join them, and Lu happily drags Hiraku along. By late afternoon, they were able to finish crushing all the grapes and collect their juices. Now, the yeast on the skin of the grapes should ferment them. Hiraku wonders if they made too much since they were able to collect 16 barrels of juices. But Lu points out that they are surely just going to drink it all anyway. Meanwhile, God is kneeling in front of the goddess of agriculture and is asking for forgiveness. After all, they have just watched Hiraku happily living his life. However, the goddess reminds God that he mistakenly punished an innocent human soul, sneakily tried to save him, and ended up sending him to the forest of death. On top of that, he gave the human a replica of the Holy Lance Grime. God tries to make excuses and tells the goddess that the human is only using the replica as a farming tool. The goddess points out that the replica should have drained the Hiraku of his life force. But God explains that he also gave Hiraku super fast recovery abilities, meaning that he recovers everything the replica sucks out. Lastly, the goddess shakes in anger since her statue turned out to be an old man. As punishment, she makes his father, the god, to sit on his knees for 300 years. Back on the farm, Zabuton's warning bell rings again, and Hiraku checks it out armed with his spear. To his surprise, it was a strange little girl wrapped up in Zabuton's webs. Lu notices the girl and realizes that it's her little sister, Flora. A little while later, Flora is now dressed and explaining why she was in the forest. After she heard that Lu was being chased by the angel Tia, she followed her all the way there. Since she's already there, Hiraku invites her to stay with them for a while. Flora accepts his offer, but she can't believe Hiraku is her sister's husband. Lu explains that Hiraku is actually the one in charge, the master of the Inferno Wolves, and he even took down a wyvern. Flora finally understands her sister and she prostrates herself in front of Hiraku as an apology. Meanwhile, this is the first time Hiraku learns that Kuro and his ilk are actually Inferno Wolves. Kuro demonstrates the Inferno in their names by blowing fire out of his mouth. Afterward, they feed Flora the various delicacies they have cooked at the farm. She immediately takes a liking to tofu, the soft white stuff made from soybeans. Hiraku then proceeds to explain that he actually wants to cook miso and soy sauce, which are also both made from fermented soybeans. It seems that in this world, fermented foods like wine and cheese exist. However, people aren't aware of the microorganisms that cause the fermentation. Flora immediately starts taking down notes after hearing Hiraku's explanation. Hiraku recognizes that, just like Lu, Flora seems to be very passionate about her research. After staying for a few days, Flora leaves, stating that she'll bring the wonders of miso and soy sauce to the world. After 1 month, she finally returns with an army of maids and some animals, and the representatives of the maids introduces herself and asks Hiraku for some work. Meanwhile, Hiraku appreciates the cows Flora brought along since they can now make butter and cheese. Meanwhile, Tia, who is watching the proceedings, suddenly realizes that everyone seems to be in a group. The vampires now have a lot of maids. There are also a lot of elves. The wolves have a pack, and even the spiders aren't alone. Meanwhile, she's all by herself. Tia instantly tells Hiraku that she'll be gone for a few days and flies away. When she returns, she now has her underlings with her. There are 3 angels, Granmaria, Kudel, and Corone, as well as a group of lizardmen with Daga as their leader. She also brought some chickens so they can have eggs. The maids quickly take over the chores on the farm. Hiraku notices that they were just eating simple dishes like boiled potatoes, so he teaches them different cooking methods. The maids were strong thanks to their race being ogres, and also quick learners, being able to serve him food after teaching them how to cook. As for the angels, Tia orders them to be the guards around the forest so that incidents like the wyvern showing up won't easily happen again. The lizardmen become the ones in charge of all the laborious work outdoors. Meanwhile, Rhea had gathered all the remaining elves in the forest and brought them there to help. Hiraku asks why she just brought girl elves, but Rhea explains that the men weren't able to survive. Nevertheless, they plan to start rebuilding their population. Hiraku cheers them on and decides not to ask how they plan to do it. A few days later, Hiraku gathers the representatives of everyone for a meeting. He wants to come up with a name for their place. Before it was just his hut and some fields, but now they are almost like a village. Lu suggests that they should name it after the founder, but Hiraku doesn't really like the names Hiraku Village or Machio Town. The maid Anne suggests naming it after the forest, but Hiraku doesn't exactly know the name of the forest. After learning that it's called the Forest of Death, he also immediately rejects the name Village of Death. The spider Zabuton then raises her head and points at the door, prompting Hiraku to open it. Upon opening the door, Hiraku gazes at the giant tree outside. With that, he decides to name the place the Great Tree Village. That night, in front of a great bonfire, Hiraku announces their new name, and in celebration, they are holding a party. It would also be the debut of their new drink, the first batch of wine made in the Great Tree Village. Everyone starts chanting, "Mayor!" at Hiraku, and he reminds them that that's something they need to decide later together. The chants, however, didn't stop, and Lu and Tia also voiced their support for him. Left with no choice, Hiraku accepts the position and happily cheers with them. The party then commences with everyone eating, drinking, and dancing together. Later, a drunk Tia notices Hiraku quietly watching them and invites him to sit beside her. She asks him if he's okay, and he just admits that he's so happy that everything feels like a dream. The two toast their new village, and Hiraku watches everyone in celebration. The number of the people in the settlement increased again between winter and summer. Due to this, the villagers collectively decided to call their new community the Great Tree Village, and they chose Hiraku as the mayor. As the mayor, Hiraku maintains his daily routine amongst the people like everyone else. On that day, Hiraku receives a message from a flying girl informing him that a messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived in their community. Though he accompanies the girl to receive the visitor, he is nervous because it is his first task as a mayor. The messenger from the demonic kingdom steps forward and introduces himself as Bizel. Hiraku equally introduces himself, and Bizel examines him from head to toe. Bizel stretches his hand, and a box appears to his outstretched hand in a dazzle of green light. Everyone draws closer to see, and he hands it to Hiraku as a gift in commemoration of their new acquaintance. Hiraku receives it with thanks and passes it on to one of his people. Bizel informs Hiraku that the demon lord would like to know the status of their new settlement. Earlier, Hiraku and his people had thought that no particular person owned the land and therefore created their settlement there. But they understood that it may be under the authority of the demon lord. As a sign of taking up his first responsibility, Hiraku thinks for a moment and proffers that if the demon lord is willing to have them stay on his land, they will pay an annual tax of 10% to him, which will be remitted before every winter. But the tax will be restricted to only things grown on the field and does not involve the milk, eggs, honey, or alcohol that his people will produce. Hiraku volunteers a trade negotiation that will happen if the demon lord likes any of their products. After signing the contract, Hiraku feels that he was too uptight with the negotiation and offers Bizel a parting gift to go home with. Afterwards, he asked his close associate if he had done the matter properly, and they assured him that he had done well. Everyone gives their opinion to him and commends him for the good decision of having them come to their place to get the produce every year, which will put their community under the protection of the demon lord and equally make them get official recognition from the demonic kingdom. Besides, by giving them annual payments, the demonic kingdom will not be able to fully monitor all their produce. The people of the community are excited about the gift from Bizel, which is a potent medicine that works on an injury if a person drinks or directly applies it to the injury. Back at the demonic kingdom, the four generals of the demon lord, including Bizel, discuss his mission to the Great Tree Village, and he recounts the details of his meeting with the people. The four generals are suspicious of their motives and how easily they submitted to their military force. But Bizel informs them that he had no choice but to agree to the proposal because the vampire princess and the angel of annihilation were present at the meeting. The generals exclaim in disbelief that the great sage Lulusi and the strongest of all angels reside amongst the new settlers. But Bizel adds that they have a trio of killer angels, an army of elves, and much more. At the meeting, Bizel understood that his refusal of the proposal might lead them to become enemies with such great force, which made him accept the offer without hesitation. He presents the parting gift to the other generals, who are still trying to process the information he has just given them. While some suggest that they should present the gift to the demon lord to hear his opinion, Bizel examines the cloth wrapping the gift of fruit, which is from a great spider. Randon, one of the generals, instantly resigns from his position because of the information about the strength of the Great Tree community and their new findings. Back at the Great Tree Village, a dragon lands among them and introduces himself as Draim, the one true ruler of the dragons. His human assistant presents a gift of swords to Hiraku and his people as a way of giving them a formal welcome to the place. He explains that Draim's lair is south of their settlement, which is quite far from the Great Tree Village, but they wanted to pay a formal visit to them. Hiraku appreciates the gesture but regrets his inability to invite them inside his house due to Draim's size. Draim's assistant communicates Hiraku's desires to him, and he changes into his human form to make him smaller. In Hiraku's tent, Draim is overjoyed at the warm reception and refuses to leave for home, but his assistant objects to that as their kingdom will be vulnerable without its leader. Draim objects that he can counter any attack from Hiraku's place, but finally agrees to leave. After much persuasion from his servant, Hiraku offers them parting gifts, which makes Draim very happy. Outside, he changes into his large dragon form and flies away. After their departure, Hiraku calls a meeting with his close companions and informs them that they should build a great guest house to receive visitors, as he is neither comfortable with receiving them outside nor in their houses. They agreed to build a house fit for the 30 people as the guest area. The work began, and everyone joined hands together to build the guest house. Hiraku assigns roles to everyone, consisting of how to defend the community, alerting everyone of a guest, greeting and receiving visitors, and people in charge of taking care of the guests. To avoid enemies disguised as visitors, Hiraku follows the advice of his people and adds several people to the welcome party, while advising his people to rest even while guarding against attacks. After making all these supposedly needed preparations, they got put to use sooner than Hiraku had expected. Later that day, they are visited by a group of beastmen led by Garf, who claims they are from a place in the mountains called Howling Village. As a reason for coming, he states that they want to establish a relationship with Hiraku's people. Hearing him say this, Lu steps up to handle the negotiations. While she acknowledges that their journey might have been a rough one, she welcomes them into the Great Tree Village. She offers to take them to the guest house, but asks if all of them in the group are present. While Garf confirms that this is all of them, she threatens to treat the others who they find as enemies. Hearing her say this, Hiraku wonders what she's talking about. Just then, the Inferno Wolves fish out some of them who had been hiding. Seeing that his men have been found out, Garf apologizes on their behalf, stating that they are stragglers. This makes Lu mockingly advise him to always make sure his men are complete. After that, she threatens them to behave themselves while in the village. When they agree to do so, she leads them to the guest house. On getting to the guest house, they are greeted by many maids and are led to dinner. After placing them there, Tia locks the door. Watching her do this, Hiraku is bothered, mostly because this feels like she is trapping enemies rather than welcoming guests. To make him understand her actions, Tia reminds Hiraku of the fact that every visitor they have had come through with gifts. As much as she thinks they aren't friendly, she isn't so sure and wishes to find a way to prove her thoughts. She believes they shouldn't get the normal treatment since they didn't follow the normal procedure. Furthermore, the fact that they had left 2 of their men in the woods earlier bothers her. Amidst this, Hiraku seeks to know if Kudal and the other girls had spotted the troops. Tia reveals that they might have noticed them but decided that they weren't a threat. Due to this, she intends to punish them later. However, when Hiraku pleads on their behalf, she promises to go easy on them. Later that day, Hiraku goes to the kitchen to check on the food for their new visitor. Unfortunately, he meets something below the standard of what they would normally serve their visitors. Seeing how he reacts, the cook points out his assumption. When he agrees to this, she reveals that there is a difference between guests who brought a sword and those who brought nothing. This makes Hiraku understand the reason for the ill treatment of the men. On the other hand, he is surprised to see that they haven't been served any wine and points it out. Meanwhile, when the men eat their food, Hiraku feels bad that they have to eat something meager. Tia, however, cautions him to ignore such emotions. Furthermore, she points out that the men are supposed to be here for important negotiations, but have instead not stated why they are here. This prompts them to be resolute about finding out why. Meanwhile, even though every one of them didn't want the visitors to be given any wine, Hiraku insists that they be given some. This action makes him very happy. Even though they are only allowed to take 2 cups each, he is happy that they get to enjoy themselves. Also, he's determined to show them kindness until it is proven that they are really enemies. With this in mind, he decides to find out why they have come to the village. Before asking them that, he seeks to know more about Howling Village. In response, he is told that it has been around for 1,000 years. Also, the Howling Village is divided into 5 small villages, and most of the population are beastmen. Apparently, the people of Howling Village make a living from mining and hunting. Even though they had earlier traded with another village, they had experienced some recent trouble. This caused the trading between them to be unstable. This happens to be the reason why the beastmen have come to meet Hiraku. Amidst all of this, Hiraku wonders how they found out about the existence of the village. In response, they state that they had heard about it from one of the demon response people. At that moment, one of the beastmen who had been caught hiding expresses his satisfaction at being caught. This is due to the kind of food he had been served, which he would have regretted missing. Hearing him say this, Tia asks why he was hiding. In response, he states that they had been hiding because they had to be on guard when coming to a new place, most especially since some needed to return to the village. Watching Tia ask questions and receive these answers gets Hiraku thrilled. With this, he thinks she is doing a great job at gathering the information they need. After a while, it became a fact that the beastmen had come to establish trade with them. For their trade, Garf suggests they exchange physical goods since they lack currency for trading. However, the idea of a currency remains in Hiraku's thoughts as he decides to create that later. Garf proposes that he wishes to open a market in the 2 villages and wishes for them to trade in his. He states that it's hard for them to carry the heavy goods they have brought back to their village. He, however, asks Hiraku if they are able to navigate the forest easily. With this question, Hiraku considers using dogs as a means of transport. With that thought in mind, he asks Garf what they intend to trade with. Just then, Garf shows him some silverware, glass and metalworks made from the ore they have mined. Seeing them gets Hiraku excited as he wishes to have them all. In exchange for these, Garf suggests that they be given foodstuff. Immediately, Hiraku accepts their terms and promises to provide them with food crops they need. With the negotiation ended, Hiraku bids the beastmen farewell. Before leaving, Garf apologizes for not coming with gifts since he didn't know anything like that existed, most especially since his village has no custom like that. He, however, apologizes in advance for not being able to provide an expensive gift, since their village is poor. To this, Hiraku assures him that the thought put into the gift matters its worth. Hearing this, Garf is happy. On the bright side, Hiraku seeks the help of Drime to transport his people to the Howling Village in exchange for wine. Although the beastmen were reluctant about trying what Tia had brought to be sold to them, they ended up with it after being offered free samples. Also, Tia informs Hiraku about the 20 people who have been showing interest in living in his village. However, they are all female. As a condition, he states that at least 2 young men be added. When the new settlers arrive, Hiraku is surprised to see that they had brought 3 male children instead of the young men he had asked for. He, however, believes they will be of help to him in a few years. Did you enjoy this recap? If you did, kindly like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can bring you the recap of the next episode. Until next time, do take care and stay safe.